So Cenk did a video about Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation to the Supreme Court, and there was an excerpt of the video that I found very disheartening, to say the least. So I'm going to play that excerpt and explain why it annoyed me.
Okay, let's get going. So, Amy Coney Barrett, of course, the GOP nominee, the Trump nominee for the Supreme Court, and she is, I think she's a religious radical. She votes and like a judicial radical, a religious radical judicially. I'll explain that in a second as well. She won easily, 52 to 48. Murkowski before said, "Oh, this is outrageous. I can't believe they're going to do it this way." And then at the end, she's like, "Just kidding. I'll vote for her." All those other moderate Republicans, who are they? No one. No one at all. There is no such thing. They all voted for her. They didn't care that Merrick Garland was delayed for a year and she is put on the Supreme Court 8 days before an election. They didn't care how much of a hypocrites they were. Okay, now if you watched it closely, you say, wait, Cenk, that's not fair. It's not no one. They did get one Republican vote. That's Susan Collins of Maine. Look, if you don't follow politics this closely, I don't blame you. That's my job. So, Mitch McConnell, and both sides do this, but Mitch McConnell's actually good at his job, not the job of doing policy that helps his voters, but the job of politics that helps the Republican Party and his donors. So Mitch McConnell, Schumer is of course not very good at this, but they will release votes. What releasing a vote means is, Susan Collins, we know you're in a super tough race in Maine and you have to pretend to be moderate. And we have plenty of votes. We're going to win 52-48. So I release you. You can go ahead and vote against her, pretending that you're against her, when we all know, of course, you'll do anything I tell you to do if the chips were on the line. And Collins goes, "Yes, sir," or "Thank you, sir, for releasing me, sir." And that's how it works, okay? They can pretend all day long otherwise. And if any media is telling you anything opposite than that, they're woefully misinformed.
So during this clip I played, Cenk claimed that McConnell fed Collins so that she could vote against Barrett in order to help her in her re-election bid, which she's admittedly had a hard time with. It's a competitive race in Maine right now. One of the things that Jimmy Dore talks about is that if Trump were to say pass single payer, free college, and all 7 wars the U.S. is currently in that started before he took office, he would be happy. He would say this is good. And he would not care about the reasons behind Trump doing it. So long as he got the policies that he liked, he would be satisfied. Now, I remember when Collins voted for Kavanaugh, you had progressives that were mad, Democrats that were mad, the whole leftist movement within the United States. And they were upset with her to such a degree that I didn't see them express towards other Republicans. As most people know, the majority of the Republicans in the Senate do not publicly say whether or not they have doubts about voting for someone. So people were more upset, and I've said this before, at the one senator who ended up voting for Kavanaugh, despite having some reservations about it, than they were at the ones who were going to vote for him no matter what. And this is something that Cenk did with Murkowski in the clip where he says she spoke about being opposed, and then she said, "Psych, I'm going to vote for her anyway." And that's really not what happened. It's a really skimmed over abridged version, and it's a bad faith assumption, because she talked about how in voting in the procedural vote to not have the nomination go forward, she felt defeated, but she didn't dislike Barrett as a nominee. So after believing that the one thing she could do to quell the nomination from coming up from a vote was bested, she wasn't going to pretend that she had a problem with this lady's record. But this is just what I was talking about when I said Murkowski talked a good game here, but she ultimately ended up voting for Barrett. Collins voted against Barrett and Cenk somehow finds a way to be dissatisfied with both of them. So think about this. If you vote for the Supreme Court pick that he doesn't like, he has nasty things to say about you. But if you vote against that Supreme Court pick, he also has nasty things to say about you, at least if you have an R by your name, because he was talking about how the moderate Republicans don't exist. And Cenk is a person who, by virtue of covering politics every week as a career, I assume to know better than to make the claims that he made during this clip. Just to give you a little rundown of some of the things Collins has done. She voted for, even though it's true that out of the three Trump Supreme Court nominees, so Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, this is the only one she's voted against. She voted for both of Obama's Supreme Court nominees that came up for a vote. So Kagan and Sotomayor. She was one of 7 Republicans to vote to get out of Yemen, which is apparently a thing that TYT actually cares about, so much so that they treat the people who vote the way they want on that like crap too. She was one of 3 Republicans, along with McCain and Murkowski, to save the ACA. She was one of 2 Republicans to vote against DeVos for education secretary. You know, she was one of 12 Republicans, I believe, at the beginning of last year. They called them the Dirty Dozen, to vote against Trump's immigration funding. So this lady has had multiple votes that set her aside from a majority of her party to where she is considered one of the top 3 Republican senators that votes with Trump the least. And it really bothers me because you can say that stuff isn't enough for you to believe she is a moderate. But what Cenk did when he tried to say, oh, this person, you know, Murkowski, they talk a good game, is to infer that these votes don't exist, to take these votes and to not acknowledge them, not because he can't find these votes or doesn't know they happen. TYT covered all of these things, or at least a majority of them. I know they covered the DeVos showdown and the Obamacare showdown. So this is less so about the person not having a moderate record, or at least one that is more left-leaning than other Republicans, and more so them trying to ignore that record because this person has an R by their name, and no matter what they do, I'm going to crap on them because I want the Democrats to win the Senate. And, you know, I talked a while back about how when you're a moderate, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, it really seems like, especially with the Republicans, you can never satisfy people enough. Collins and Murkowski have votes I don't like. You know, I would say they're pretty even, but I'm not going to pretend that politicians who on multiple occasions vote in ways that I like are demons or the villains just because they have an R by their name. And I'm most certainly not going to pretend that her record isn't more moderate than the majority of the other Republican senators. And I'm not going to get upset with her for voting the way I wanted. Well, she's only doing this because of her reelection. Who gives a damn? The Republicans were only able to confirm Barrett because of the fact that most of the elections that had taken place for the Senate in recent years have gone the way of the Republicans, which is why they have a majority in the Senate. You know, we can get into the theatrics of why someone may do something, but it should tell you everything you need to know about how twisted a lot of these progressives are, where they'll get upset with someone for voting the way they don't like, which they should if they don't like the vote, or they are allowed to. But they'll also get upset with someone for voting the way they like. I think Manchin, he's a Democrat from West Virginia, is a piece of garbage. But if he votes for single payer, if he votes to get out of Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Pakistan, Somalia, any of those countries, I'm not going to get upset with him. I'm not going to say he's only doing this because he's got an election in a year. I don't care. I'll say good job. I'll say I'm glad that he voted in the way I like, because I actually pay attention to who votes in a certain way and who doesn't. And I know TYT has just as many resources, if not more than me, to where they can be just as informed, but they are purposely deluding their audience into thinking this woman is some person who just flaps her gums when her record shows that's anything but the case.